you're going in and out a little bit. You're probably a little bit far from your router, your Wi-Fi.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
All right. So
do we have a quorum?
we do have a quorum. We have Don and Robert and Carrie and Carl and Susan present. I did not see Gayatri. And I know that Bob Lyons will not be with us tonight. So we do have 5.
Okay. All right, and since Bob's not here, thanks for the fair warning, at least 5-10 minutes in advance, Sean. That was really nice of you. All right, we'll start with the agenda. Meeting minutes of 11/22/2021.
Move approval.
I'll second the motion.
Robert, did you second? I missed that.
Geez. So it sounds like you're not picking me up very well. I will second the motion.
Yeah, so Robert did second. So we have a motion from Susan and second by Robert.
Okay, so by the way, is anyone else having difficulty tracking Robert other than me? Just to make sure it's not my Wi-Fi.
We're fine.
Don, actually, you sound a little slow, and
He is cutting out?
yeah, but I hear Robert fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, if
Well, if I need to put
exit
on-
and come back in.
If I need to put on headphones, I will to pick up better, but if you're hearing me fine, I'll hold off.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's coming through for me. Okay.
Yeah,
You're in
I'm
good
hearing
now.
fine.
All right. Okay. Any further discussion on the minutes? We've got in a second for approval. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Sidewalk construction along Old Creek Road and Pheasant Branch. Or 2 Pheasant Branch, I'm sorry. And Pheasant Branch, I guess. All right.
Yep. So this was an old referral really from the Ped Bike Transit Committee that I didn't pick up on, and Mark Opitz, who's staff to that committee, brought it to my attention recently. So I said, oh, I'll put it on the next agenda then. I guess there had been some interest from residents of Middleton Glen, the apartment complex just next to Old Creek Road, to install sidewalk along Old Creek Road. But looking at it, I mean, it's all ditch and there's a drain pipe that comes off of Middleton Glen. So I'm not sure where one would build a sidewalk without a road project. If the goal is to get to the Conservancy, I think we could extend a sidewalk or narrow path north along Pheasant Branch Road to get to that sort of crosswalk on Pheasant Branch Road that goes from Middleton Hills down into the Conservancy. But probably not effectively along Old Creek Road just because of the rural cross section. So I don't know if you wanted to see any of the drawings that I had put into the packet for a future road project, or any of the photos from that area.
Dawn, would you pull up maybe the photos?
Sure.
And Glenn. And I do have maybe a little more information and understanding. Okay, they apparently, whenever there's some sort of emergency, they are sent out the back of the building. And then to get back in, they have to walk up Old Creek Road, which is not particularly wide. I have explained to them the problem with the ditch on the west side. and that it would require doing, basically rebuilding the road. The problem with putting a sidewalk on the east side is that's where a lot of the residents on the east side park, even though it's a city easement. And in this discussion, one of the things that came up was the idea of making Pheasant Branch or Old Creek Road one way coming in, and that they would feel more comfortable walking on it with it being a one-way road. So that's one thing. I think definitely we want a path from Old Creek Road to the steps and path leading into the Conservancy would be ideal for people getting to the Conservancy. But there's two reasons why this is being asked for.
And so could you explain maybe just a little bit further? I'm not sure I got it, and I don't know how many committee members did. What does it mean that somebody has to walk along this road?
They are being, in emergencies for some reason, they are being told to leave the back of Middleton Glen.
Okay.
And they're not allowed to come back in through that back door, apparently.
Why not?
I don't know. So they are having to walk along Pheasant Branch Road to get to the front.
Hmm.
Now, is there anybody on this Zoom call that's from Middleton Glen?
I saw Jan Hansen
Yes.
joined us.
I'm Jan Hansen, and I have I guess I've talked to both you, Mr. Stowski, and to Alder West, and we're in the process of developing a strategic plan. And as part of that strategic plan, we want to improve our evacuation routes. And so we plan on exiting, there are a couple of exits on kind of which would be the southeast side of our building. We have that big south lawn. That lawn faces Old Creek Road. And so we want to construct asphalt paths that lead down to Old Creek Road, and then use Old Creek Road to get over to Pheasant Branch Road. And so that's why we're asking, well, first of all, we were going to ask for a sidewalk, but we've had explained to us that that's maybe both financially and really some building or construction problems involved. So that may be ruled out. So as Alder West mentioned, we were thinking maybe a good alternative for us would be to construct or to make Old Creek Road a one-way road. That way it would be possible to use half of the road for that one-way traffic, and then the other half of the road could be kind of a walking, biking path that would be safe for us to use to get back up to Pheasant Branch Road.
And also to Century.
And also we could use it, of course, to get to Century Avenue if we needed to do that. But the road, the way it is, our population, the average age of our population is somewhere around 80 years. And so, walking for some of us is a problem. And so some of our residents have to use walkers, some even use sidewalks. And without sort of a proper walking or riding path along Old Creek Road, we would really have some problems. And especially with two-way traffic. That traffic sometimes whips past there pretty fast, and that would present a problem for us. So that's why we're sort of or that's why we're asking, as a second best alternative for us to turn it into a one-way and then use kind of the east side of the road for traffic, for automobile traffic, and the west side for biking and walking. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess my first thought is then that would be painted somehow. We'd put a line on the road hoping to encourage vehicles to stay to the right. I don't
Right.
know if that means that it's safe to walk both directions on the other side of the painted line. The way the state statutes read, you have to walk facing the direction of traffic. And I don't know that as the city, we get to decide what that means.
Right. Yeah, I see that. But if there was a clearly defined line between the driving lane and the walking, biking lane, you would have, half of the road, to use. And we think there's more safety in that than trying to scoot along, that the two-lane road that it is now. As a matter of fact, we often walk that road, and we actually spend more time stepping off to the side of the road because the traffic that passes, and this would avoid some of that. And, I'm not saying that's going to solve all the problems, but what I'm saying is that would certainly improve our ability to use that road.
Well, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sean, I have a question. Was there some other reason we might be considering that Old Creek Road would become one way, or is this the first time this is being discussed? Because I don't recall this as a discussion in front of this body, at least.
We have.
Have we?
I know
Yeah,
I know we as a committee in previous design work considered a pork chop down by Century Avenue to make right in, right out limitations so that people can't turn left in or left out at Century Avenue, but not one way. Do you recall, Susan, when
Sean,
that was talked about?
it was talked about, and one way was brought up in addition to simply dead ending it there. When Stagecoach Trails went in and we looked at the TIA for Stagecoach, there wasn't too much of a problem with Stagecoach, but there've been enough traffic accidents at this intersection that there was concern. We didn't talk about it in terms of anything, we were concerned about it. And I know someone made a suggestion of basically dead ending it or making it one way, and also the pork chop.
I recall that as well, Susan.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also a lot of traffic coming from the Goodwill, where the Goodwill was put in recently. And there's the common ground is going to become another apartment building, apparently. So there's a lot more traffic there than there used to be. I've only lived here 4 years and it's increased a lot since I've been here.
Yeah. For example, when we exit our building, we actually make it a point to drive up Pheasant Branch Road to Frank Lloyd Wright Road, and then we can safely turn left or right or go straight across that because of the traffic light that's there. And so, there's, I'm sure it will be safer even for the residents along Oak Creek Road.
Yeah, on that, and maybe I'm not as brave a driver, I will not make a left turn out of Old Creek Road or a right turn onto it. No, I will make a right turn onto it. But I wouldn't make a left turn into it. And actually, it's left turns into it, as I remember from the traffic study, where some of the most accidents were occurring.
To the point where we were actually gonna put a sign up or that lamb chop at the end of it, Susan, I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Oh, Don, I don't know if it's on your screen, but Carrie has her hand up too.
Oh, okay, I'm not watching the hands, I should, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt, so I was kind of just waiting till. Yeah, no, I think that, if there's other reasons to make Oak Creek Road one way, I would, want to hear that a little bit more. But in terms of walkability, that makes me really nervous. Like, I just think that, to put people on the street and like for the city to say, okay, this is a one-way street, some, people can walk on the other side of it. That I just don't think that we would want to promote that. I think sidewalks is a good option, and hopefully when we do redevelop that road, we could put sidewalks in. But I wouldn't want to make this a one-way road just to support walking.
Carrie, I'm gonna say one thing on redoing that road, and Sean will remember. In 2004, early 2004, 2003, the city was going to rebuild Pheasant Branch Road. And there was so much opposition from the people that live in conservancy condos that it was not approved. The plans went on the shelf. And I have a feeling we would have the same problem. This is unique for this road compared to other city streets where everybody wants the road rebuilt. But we've just been repaving and fixing the potholes. Is that pretty correct, Sean?
Well, sure. I don't know that it's on anyone's radar that we are going to chomp at the bit to resurrect this, but I think, to Carrie's point, there's a safety issue, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a statutory issue. So we'd have to figure out what this means. If we want to put one-way traffic on the road on its own merits for its own reasons, because the neighborhood wants to, that's fine. That's one thing, but I don't think that makes this a designated walkway. Maybe just an easier to use walkway.
What I'm saying is rebuilding Pheasant Branch Road is not going to happen anytime soon. Because of neighborhood opposition.
I'm not really hearing like a big reason to make it one way, I guess. I don't know if somebody wants to talk about that more, but I understand the walking, but like as I mentioned, and Sean mentioned, that doesn't seem like a reason to move forward with the one way.
Let me ask Jan, or Patrice, is there an option if this is your at the southeast corner of Middleton Glen, your emergency egress? Can you get a path or designated evacuation over to the driveway on the west side of the building in this grassy space?
Too steep is one thing. I mean, that's a graded, you walk down towards Old Creek. And the problem is that we're supposed to congregate for the fire department or the emergency responders on the corners of the other side. So we would exit from the south lawn, but we have to either walk up Old Creek to Pheasant Branch, or we have to walk down Old Creek to Century and then up to where our signs are on both of those places. That's where we're to congregate for rescue.
Oh.
Yeah.
And as far as putting it one way, if it were one way and there was a sidewalk, there would be room for a sidewalk. We could walk either way on the sidewalk, and then there wouldn't be a problem as far as going against traffic or not.
Yeah, I agree with Patrice on that. That would be our preference, to have a sidewalk along the road. But in talking to Alder West and other people about this, we've been told that financially and maybe, structurally, that would be very difficult because of we have a drainage ditch that would have to be maybe turned into a storm sewer, and that would financially be a constraint for the city. So a sidewalk would be our preference. There's no question about that. But, we were
Sean.
suggesting a less expensive alternative.
Sean, how expensive would it be to put a sidewalk on Old Creek on the actual pavement if we made it one way?
Well, it depends where we'd put it, I guess.
I'm saying
'cause-
on the actual road, if we made it a one-way road.
Yeah, but we still need a minimum width to be able to run a plow on what's left of the road. And I don't know that we would have that if we raised up and paved over a raised sidewalk on part of that road. Maybe. I don't know that.
Okay, is that something we could look into?
Well, if we want to, but I got to tell you, it's not going to fit in my schedule anytime soon. I mean, what we're
Yeah.
trying to get done next year. This isn't
I
on the
know.
list yet.
I see that Mark Opitz, another city staff who staffs Ped Bike Transit, has raised his hand.
He has.
Mark, I think you can go ahead. I'll speak for Don.
Thank
I was waiting. I just had a question to try and understand this a bit further beyond the discussion that we had at Ped Bike Transit in August. If the intent is to have egress from the building and provide a place for people to walk, one question I have is could the connection be from the egress of the building to the south and west to connect back towards Century Avenue and the Craftsman parking lot? Because I'm looking at an air photo and I'm seeing that there's as I see the air photo here, which I know you don't have on the screen, Sean, but I don't know what the topography is back there, but is that a possibility to connect to what's the underground parking entrance, I think it is? Maybe there's a dumpster there too.
To walk west, and I think you must have just missed it, but Patrice said that that's too steep uphill
Okay, I'm sorry, I did miss that.
Mhm.
to walk
Okay.
west.
Okay,
Yeah, very steep.
okay, then,
Right,
So part of the question might be, in the event of an emergency, if there's a large enough group walking together on the west side of Pheasant Branch Road, Old Creek Road up toward Pheasant Branch Road, do you have anybody that sort of marshals that would have a safety vest or a flag or something that would just be able to move vehicles over whenever that happens?
It is a possibility, obviously, but again, it's not a preferred way of doing it. And part of the reason is that we do have some residents who are going to have to use walkers, and we even have some that are going to use wheelchairs, and so the procession would be spread out, I would imagine. So, something like a marked path or a sidewalk put on top of the asphalt road, as somebody suggested,
Would it be possible to change the marshalling area to the southeast corner of the property and not walk on the road?
Sean,
Yeah,
you still
except-
have to walk on the road to get to the front of the building.
Well, but what I'm saying is, what if you don't go to the front of the building? In the event of an emergency, what if you just get away from the building?
That's right. Then we would have to kind of extend our paths in that direction. Part of the problem with that is, you know, if you can imagine an emergency where, say, 50 people are trying to hustle out of the building in a big hurry just to get out of the building. You know, some people are not going to be adequately dressed, and if it's in the winter time, it's even going to be more of a problem. We have experience trying to gather a group on the lawn, and because of the response of the fire department and so on, we were really stuck waiting there for quite a while. And when it gets cold, you know, that presents a problem.
But wouldn't that same thing happen if you were going to the corner? You were walking a lot longer way. I mean, put an asphalt platform down there, led to it by sidewalk or paths over the property.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
that
part
would
of what
make
I
a
was
lot more
wondering too,
sense than trying to get to the one of the corners.
is if you're waiting here, it's maybe even faster to get there than to find your way up this road and hope no police or ambulance or fire are using this road. But if you're just waiting here, you're still outside, right?
Yes, but you know that is true, and we have done some of that, and we've actually ended up being invited into, you know, some of the buildings, like the bakery and cafe have let some of the people in, you know, to warm up, you know, and so on.
That's when they're open.
Yeah, but
I've been evacuated
they
several
close at
times in
2
the middle
o'clock,
of the
and they're
night.
certainly not open in the evening.
There's,
Yeah.
but I'd like to just say, it's not just about the emergency evacuation. That was the main reason that we've asked for this. But our people walk on Old Creek Road when it's nice weather all the time. We use it as we walk around the building. And we don't like to walk on Century because the sidewalk is so close to the traffic. It's very noisy and it's kind of scary. That traffic is fast. So we tend to walk Pheasant Branch down Old Creek and then back up again for exercise. And that's why I thought about the sidewalk would be good for us. No matter what, it would be good for all people to get to and from towards the Conservancy.
Sure. I think it's something that could be looked at the next time this road gets redone, but I don't see any way to get a sidewalk in there under the current conditions. I think it's a pretty major project that the answer for today, I think, has to be no. I think we could, you know, certainly our goal is to put more sidewalks into communities when we, you know, are changing roads anyway, and then you know, then that's part of the design project to do that. But that's a lot of lands, that's a lot of moving of land and changing the way water flows, and I don't think we have the engineering studies to support anything like that at this time. So I think I really appreciate the citizens bringing this to our attention. I think for right now, I would make a motion that I'm not even sure what my motion is, other than to say kind of look at this next time we're touching this road. Otherwise, for today, I think we can't do this.
I guess, Robert, I'd like to sort of say, at least consider a road along Pheasant Branch Road from Old Creek down to where you enter through Conservancy condos to go to the Conservancy. That also needs, and that could just be an asphalt path put in the easement.
You said a road, but you meant a sidewalk or path along
Sidewalk, a
Pheasant
path,
Branch
yes.
Road? Just
Mhm.
that 350 feet or so?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think that's very needed. Not just, that would at least give more space for walking for the Middleton Glen residents. And there's lots of Conservancy condo residents that walk from up into the Middleton Hills retail area.
Mhm.
Where does that go though? Like I see your cursor moving, but then where's it connecting?
Carrie, there's a
There's a
Let me get
picture
to
a
Basically,
little further
trail.
down that might show it better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a trail that connects from Middleton
one.
Hill across Pheasant Branch into Conservancy condos, and it goes through Conservancy condos down to the main Conservancy.
Yeah, I've used that path before. Okay, so you're saying from Old Creek, we would build a sidewalk through that area right there.
Right.
Yeah, could I make a comment about that? You know, that's great. You know, for people like my wife and me, we are pretty able to walk. So we walk on the side of Pheasant Branch all the time to get into the Conservancy. But that involves, you know, probably 15 steps, you know, down from Pheasant Branch down to the road, the condo roads there, and then another steep path down to the path that leads from that road over to the Conservancy. And that is not really usable for people who have a little handicap in walking. You know, so that solves the solution for some people. And I think the people in Middleton Hills would love to have a little walking, you know, paved walking path there, because it is kind of treacherous to walk along that road. So it solves the problem for some, but it doesn't solve the problem of some of our people getting into the Conservancy, because those people almost have to go down Old Creek Road to Century and then go down the hill to the entrance, you know, at Branch Street.
Mhm. Sure.
Sean, could you back up? So oh, there's probably not a picture. I wanted to see, like, is that path only connecting Old Creek Road? It's not connecting, like Pheasant Branch doesn't have any other path, right?
When you say path, what do you
not-
mean?
Like,
Oh.
so, yeah, so if you take your, no, sorry. So if you take your cursor towards Old Creek, yeah, beyond Old Creek Road,
Okay.
that's what we're only
sidewalk.
talking, that's a sidewalk.
Yep.
And
That's a sidewalk, yes.
how far does that go? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
All the way into the, you know, to the grocery store, to the cafe, to Century Avenue. That's
Mhm.
all connected.
Okay,
Because that's only because this is a new piece of road. You know, this used to be Pheasant Branch Road, and we rerouted it to go into
Okay.
Middleton Hills.
yeah, that makes sense to me then, to connect that to the Conservancy path, as Susan was saying, because otherwise it's just kind of dead ending.
I think the reason it probably didn't get built is because the condominium group really opposed that when we raised it last, that they didn't want to, well, number one, be
They
assessed
oppose
for
the
it.
road.
And number two, they didn't want to have to maintain it for, you know, shoveling or routine maintenance purposes. So I do agree it's good connectivity. I'm just saying I would expect opposition because they really didn't want to take care of anything like that.
That's a good point. Who's taking care of this? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
the
you would
adjacent
have to.
property owner.
Can I make one more comment, you know, about the plan to maybe sometime in the future reconstruct that road? You know, this issue was first brought up in 2003, 2004, when our buildings were new. and it was obviously denied at that time. So now, 16 years later, and that's how long, we've been waiting for something to happen, so if you say maybe in the future, is that going to be another 16 years? So I'm saying maybe there are some intermediate solutions that could be tried. It's a long time,
Yeah.
to
And I
be
agree.
issues.
I agree, it's a long time, but I see this as a potentially, $1 million or more thing to do the first thing that you were asking for, and I'm not sure what the next thing is. So I think for tonight, the only thing before us is the very, potentially a very expensive solution, or something that runs afoul of, I don't know if it's laws or regulations or what it is, but encouraging, we can't just paint something onto the road and say, yeah, people can walk up and down this street on a Middleton approved painted walkway on the middle of the road. I think Sean correctly points out that gets us into difficulties. So I'd say continue. It sounds like you're already talking with your alder person. Continue looking at options, and we can look at other options in the future, but the option that's been presented tonight, I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Mhm.
Is
I
there
was,
a- I would like-
sorry.
Is there a way for you to cut through the parking lot of the VFW? And would the VFW be willing to let you walk through their parking lot?
I think you would also then be having to get permission from neighbors. That would be, I don't know, I know their first names. They live in that big white house right next to the house on the corner that was torn down.
Oh, the wash.
Megan, Tom are their first name. That's how we know them, because we met them when we walked through, and
Sean, could you show an aerial view of the plats that might have the VFW? Because
I don't
Don,
have
do
that
you know?
opener handy right now.
Do you know if the VFW backs up against Middleton Glen?
It,
wonder-
well, it does on the one side, but that's a steep grade, because I end up usually not parking in their lot when I go to the VFW and I walk down that steep grade. That would be nasty.
Okay, so it is a
Yeah.
steep grade.
The best access would be from the back of the VFW and going through the lot that way. But even then, coming down that parking lot to the street could be a little bit of a challenge, especially if it's winter or there's snow or ice or something like that, although we do take care of it pretty well. And then you'd be crossing the neighbor's property as well, and you'd need their permission also. But again, we're talking emergency situations. I doubt if the VFW is going to say, no, you guys can't walk on our parking lot. I don't think there's a problem. We'll just have to, accept the conditions of the lot at the time.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I think Robert had made a motion, and is it okay? Can we?
Yeah,
Okay, can I second that motion?
And that was absent anything about a sidewalk or
Yeah.
path along Pleasant
we
Branch
can
Road.
either
This was just Old Creek Road.
right now, my motion is just about Owl Creek Road, because I do feel like it's two separate topics.
Okay,
Or Owl Creek, what is it? Old Creek Road.
Old Creek Road, yep. Mhm.
Got it.
yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's separate topics too. Like I was,
So we have a
And
motion.
just, I have one more comment, just for the emergency situations. I don't know the structure inside the building. Is there any way that the people inside the building could be routed to that parking lot rather than the back of the building, without endangering them to having to climb upstairs, go down other stairs, turn left, make a U-turn inside, and then get to the other side of the building? Because I agree that pushing people out the back of that building onto that grassy sloped area and then expecting them to walk around potentially in the dark on a snowy night seems problematic in those rare cases where, hopefully very rare, where there would be an emergency situation. If there's any way internal to your condominium procedures that you can route people out to where there's a big parking lot, I think that would be certainly something that needs to be looked at heavily, because I don't think we can quickly or easily get you a path that's safe on the road.
Yeah, I would only comment that that would mean, say, elevators are of course turned off during emergencies.
Correct.
And so we are talking about walking upstairs.
Okay.
And that for some people, that probably would not be a problem. But
Sure.
for some people, it would be maybe impossible.
Sure. Okay.
Just one other question about if Old Creek were one way, it's now two way. You could put a walking line on each side. I mean, because you only need room for one car to go one way. So that would, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it right, but if it were one way going towards.
That causes a bit of a problem because the cars are going one way, but that means the city is designing an on-street walking path where we're telling people you can safely walk with your back to the cars.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I was thinking if it was on the other side, but I understand. Sorry.
Well,
She's talking
I think what
about
happens
walking-
is you have to walk facing traffic, right? But you also
Right.
have to bike with traffic. So if we put sort of a walking/bike lane on both sides of the road with cars only driving north down the middle, whoever's walking would have to walk facing traffic, but whoever's biking would have to bike with traffic. So it just becomes really odd. We might have people walking one direction and biking in a different direction, but sharing the lane. It's not that it can't be done, but it might get really goofy.
And I think
Sounds
at
very
that point, this needs to become a pretty major project with engineers looking at it and saying, here's a plan, here's 3 plans to look at, here are all the options. And here's some costs associated with this. And maybe some areas we would need to widen areas or separate out the sidewalk from the roadway. All of these things need to be considered. It's a lot of work. And I don't feel that we have the ability to do that tonight. So so we have, my motion, I guess, is out there.
Yeah, we could probably call the question, the motion is to consider sidewalks in the future when Oak Creek is reconstructed.
But not to move forward at this time, yes.
At this time? And reconstruction could happen in many, many, many ways, and maybe sooner than later, considering the development that's happening along Century. But at this point, it can't be done immediately. I agree. So with that, I could close discussion, but let's leave it, see if there's any other comments, and then we can take action on this motion, because it has been made and seconded.
Well, I'm going to just say that on behalf of that, let me emphasize this, the 120 residents of our building, we thank you for at least talking to us or letting us present our point.
Sure. And I would strongly consider talking to your neighbors, and if you need the contact at the VFW, I can arrange that as well. But about going that south direction towards Century, and I understand Century is close to the road, and the sidewalk is, but it's also very narrow. But at this point, that is maybe your best option.
Thank you.
Okay, let's call a question. We got, do you want to Sean, take a crack at rereading the motion, or?
Sure. Bert moved that the committee consider in the future a sidewalk along Old Creek Road with a reconstruction project, but not immediately.
Okay.
And that was seconded by Carrie Scheffner.
All right. All
I
in favor? say-
I've got one question. In
Sure.
terms of the future, Sean, has this even been looked at for putting on the 5-year road replacement plan?
I'm pretty sure that it's not on our 5-year plan.
I know it's not on the plan, but do you have any idea of when it might get on?
Oh,
The
no, that's
5-year
as far out as we look.
Okay. And are there water mains under there?
There are, yep.
So that, depending on how they're doing, I guess I'm trying to get a feel for when this might actually come up.
Well, that I couldn't say. I just know it's not on our current plan.
There is
Yeah.
not, and there's nothing in this whole area that's on the 5-year plan.
That's
I
correct.
don't think so.
Pheasant Branch couldn't get bumped up, but we're gonna have so much opposition on that one. We
Yeah,
could try.
well,
And that's not part of this motion. We'll have to split that off into its own motion next.
yeah, so we
No,
just
no,
have this right
Robert,
now.
I'm just questioning when any of this could get done. So I'm talking about reconstruction of Pheasant Branch Road, which was before council in 2004 and got voted down.
Okay,
Mhm.
So it
So,
clearly has
you need
warranted
to
being
assess-
repaired
Pheasant Branch.
or reconstructed.
Mhm. And we'll have the 5-year plan back in front of the committee in spring. So if the committee wants to add it or change something, they can. It's not currently, and I don't think staff is proposing it, but if the committee does, that's a different thing.
We could always put it on and see what sort of opposition we get from Conservancy condos.
So for now, we just have this question about
Right.
constructing sidewalk along Old Creek Road with a future reconstruction project, but not immediately.
The other area where this may come up, as far as traffic is concerned, if the Madison Development Corporation goes through with their apartment complex next to Century, because this intersection would probably be part of a traffic impact analysis.
Mhm. Yes.
And therefore, it may trip a trigger, making it a one-way or doing something like that, which may enhance the advantages of redoing the road too.
absolutely.
So, all right, anything else, Susan?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
all right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, Robert, did you want to handle that one along?
Yeah, I'm
Doesn't that
separating
give
it
us-
out. I don't know that the answer is all that different right now. So I would make a motion for Pheasant Branch Road or that stretch, that we look at adding a bike path there again next time or bike path / sidewalk, whatever it is. Next time we're making changes to Pheasant Branch Road. That'd be my motion.
Okay.
Could I alter that we put not a paved bike path, walking path in now? Not to delay it, because it's at the moment a dirt muddy path if it rains. It is used a lot. So I can't see waiting to put that in. And that's not a terribly expensive project.
Okay,
That would be an entirely different motion then.
That is
Yeah.
I don't have a second on my motion yet, so why don't I just rescind my proposed motion? And Susan, why don't you make a motion?
Okay, I would move that the city put in a paved sidewalk / bike path going from Old Creek Road to the entrance into the Conservancy at Conservancy Condos.
And at whose cost?
Probably the cities, which means it'll be a year or two.
So capital budget request?
Yes,
Can always ask.
Yeah.
I'll second the motion for discussion purposes, and I do see that again, staff member Mark Opitz.
Mark has
hand
his
up?
hand up, yes, I see that. Mark? Go ahead.
Sorry, not to elongate the meeting. What I wanted to say from a future standpoint is that the city's bicycle and pedestrian plan envisions a wider sidewalk / shared use path along Century Avenue coming from Branch Street west up the hill to at least Old Creek Road. And I believe we've now shown it to extend west to Frank Lloyd Wright Avenue. That's just from memory, but that's what the intent was. So the idea is that there would be enhanced safety for pedestrians and other non-motorists along Century Avenue. And of course, Middleton Glen has a sidewalk connection along its private street, private drive connection from Century to its front door. So that connection is there today, but it would be improved in the future under our long-term plan.
okay, but that's independent of what I'm talking about for Pheasant Branch Road.
Understood, but I'm in terms of access to the Conservancy, which is what I think was one of the themes of this meeting. That,
Right.
and then of course, emergency access is a separate theme. Those are the two themes you're discussing tonight, as I
Yes.
understand.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Any other discussion on Susan's motion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye,
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we can move on to the analysis. Is this a proposal for a TIA?
It is, it's at proposal stage, and SRF put this proposal together consistent with the traffic impact analysis guidelines, as is typical. But they also offered that it, we could reduce its scope by eliminating several intersections. I think I put a map in here to make life easy. By eliminating several intersections that are somewhat remote from the proposed development, at which, in their judgment, roadway effects or at least need for improvements attributable to the site development are unlikely. So he was suggesting that the committee might want to consider modifying the TIA guidelines to remove these 4 intersections with X's through them.
John, it seems strange to me that the one off of Deming Way there, number 5, why would that be
This
X'd
one?
out? Yeah, that one seems pretty close to the project.
Well, it's fairly close to the project, but it, along the road, the driveway, the majority of traffic is coming out onto John Q. Hammons. So they'd be basically going around the. Oh, I think someone's got. Oh, Brett, you may have turned your microphone on, so we're getting feedback.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to find where I can raise my hand, but I couldn't find it. I'll mute, but I would like to speak to some of these questions that they might have.
Yeah, so the chair will probably call on you in a bit. So I was just trying to explain that for the most part, folks would have to come out on John Q. Hammons and make some left turns to get here. But depending on where they're going, of course, for most folks, they're going to find it easier just to use John Q. Hammons from where they are. So I think that their thinking is it's a limited number of trips that would go through this intersection, and it's starting to get a little bit remote. Now, this is pretty much the same as last time. Obviously, the committee can, but doesn't have to accept that recommendation from the consultant, but he offered it.
And this is the same situation where like the developer's paying, and so it's in their interest to limit the number.
Yeah, but this request isn't coming from the developer, Brett Newcomb, who's on the line here. It's coming from our consultant.
But who's paying for the TIA?
That would be the developer, right? So we're
Right.
trying to set the scope. That the city set up guidelines that said this is the normal, typical scope of work, and our consultant reached out to me and said, you know, you might want to consider limiting it to some degree to simplify things. Just because, well, up by the Beltline, there's so much background traffic that it kind of washes out any one development. And this one he thought was just a bit remote for the number of trips likely to go through there.
Yeah, I think the ones by the Beltline make sense. I think number 5, personally, I think that should go back in, but I don't know what the other members think.
Sean, what is up Deming Way?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What's up Deming Way that they would be going to?
What, up or down to the south?
To the south and, yeah,
So it's mostly a business park down there, and eventually you could get out to
Pleasant View.
Yeah,
I guess it would get towards Pleasant View, but I think it's Old Sauk that probably comes out at Heartland.
No, I think it's Pleasant View.
Pleasant. I don't go that way myself a lot.
I
I thought
was
maybe
there
it went out to
tonight.
Old Sauk. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I go that way a lot, and that's just why I'm thinking it might be
It
good
does,
to include it.
you can get to Old Sauk from there, but I don't know if you can get there directly from Deming Way, or how many times you have to turn off of Deming Way to do another road to another road. But
No, you go, yeah, it's Deming Way goes to Pheasant View.
Right.
Right.
I've accidentally taken Deming Way instead of John Q. Hammond, and I know I can eventually get to Old Sauk.
Oh, yeah, you can, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
you can. But
But I
that's,
guess what I'm saying is I
Wait.
definitely have taken Deming Way, then to Black Hawk Road to Pleasant View. I feel like, and there's quite a bit of traffic, at least I've noticed. So that's why I think it'd be good to include that.
okay. And actually, Carrie, you've got a point, because at Pleasant View and Black Hawk, there's already a stoplight there. And I don't know, when we reconstruct Pleasant View, is that going to become a roundabout or stay as?
It is a roundabout,
Mhm, mhm.
and that really doesn't matter for this discussion, but yeah.
Okay, so
So
there'll be 2 roundabouts on Pleasant View then.
Correct.
Okay,
If the chair is willing, I would be interested in hearing if the developer, Mr. Newcomb, has any clarifications or thoughts he would want to give. I'd be interested in hearing his thoughts.
Sure, Brett, go ahead. If you have anything to add, that would be good.
Okay, thanks, guys. All right, so I'm Brett Newcomb. I'm a Middleton resident. My office is actually right down by intersection number 6, right down there. And my wife and I, we bought this piece of land. It's about 4 acres. It's across the street from the Marriott Convention Center, and it's just north of the Old Sauk Trails Business Park and just south of the Greenway Center retail area. So this site was zoned Planned Development District, PDD. And the only reason we're talking about this TIA is because we had a 100,000 square foot office building designed for this site with 400 cars to park on it, which was totally appropriate for PDD zoning. When the pandemic hit, office buildings went away. I know because I build office buildings. I built Fiskars, Spectrum Brands, Mead and Hunt, a lot of buildings you guys know about in Middleton. So we decided, okay, so we asked ourselves, what is the next best use for this parcel of land? So we went back to Middleton and we said, what do you guys think about an apartment building? They loved it. So we amended the zoning to allow an apartment building. An apartment building will have half the car parking that an office building would have. So the apartment's going to have 170 units and there'll only be 200 cars on this site versus the office building, which would have 400 cars. The convention center across the street is going to have much more cars than that when they have conventions. And the retail at Greenway Center is going to, as you know, retail's like much more. So when the streets were put in, this was all put in when Greenway Center was developed. And when the Greenway Center was developed in 1989, the city had a study done called the Southwest Quadrant Study. It was a major study, traffic impact, sewer, water, all that, to account for the major development of Greenway Center. That study helped set the standards for all the streets and the intersections that we have out there today. So my site is designed for major car uses. The PDD zoning would allow for hotels, convention centers, expo centers, office, retail, all that could have been built on my site. I just simply amended the zoning to allow for apartments. Apartments is much less intensive as far as cars. But still, I have to get this traffic analysis done because it's the city practice to have this done. But this thing has cost me like $20,000 and it's going to take 2 months to do it. And I want to break ground in February. And time is money with apartments because you got to get the people on site to do it before they go on to their next apartment building. You know, there's limited resources now with foundation contractors, framers, everybody to get these things built. And I've got a time slot that allows us to start in February. But now this TIA is going to take us all the way out to February. So it's delaying my potential permit to start. The other thing is that the intersections to the south of my site, they're not even in Middleton. That's Madison. So if the TIA came back and said, you know, you need to improve that intersection, well, Middleton's not going to improve those intersections anyway, because that's Madison. So what I'm here for tonight is to suggest this. One, I don't really care to spend $20,000 on a TIA that's really unnecessary. It's just not logical, because all the streets have already been improved for major traffic. My use now is much less traffic impact. So I'd like for you guys to maybe even waive the traffic impact analysis altogether. But if you don't, let's at least skinny it back so it's reasonable priced, and then ask their consultant, SRF, if they can do it by February 7th, so it doesn't delay my permit. I can answer any questions if you have any.
No.
To a couple of those things, and I think they're good points.
Yeah.
You know, from my perspective, I know the city council adopted these guidelines with the expectation that it would apply to rezonings and conditional use permits. And while this was zoned for a different use than is now being proposed, that use could have had more traffic, but it might be at a different time of day, which is part of why the council, I think, wants to investigate these things before making approvals. So if the committee wants to waive the TIA entirely, I think you can do that. You know, I would appreciate if you would offer a rationale for the purposes of the minutes then, so it doesn't just look to other developers like we're waiving it just because. That can be a problem down the road otherwise. I'll mention too that when the general implementation plan for this specific development was approved by the council in June, the council approved that amendment with a contingency of approval of the TIA and satisfaction of any traffic improvements required. When it went to SIP for the specific implementation plan, that contingency changed somewhat to say, you know, contingent upon the TIA, but pending a determination by the Public Works Director that the TIA is required for this site. And I don't think the council's ever done that to me before. Because it isn't truly discretionary for me to decide whether it is or isn't necessary.
Sean, we don't, well, no, well, I'll take that back. Robert is an engineer. I was gonna say the rest of us aren't.
It's okay with me, and I'm not saying that that's not among the palette of options available to the
Yeah.
Public Works Committee. Just like I say, a rationale would be appreciated. And as it regards timing, ordinarily we try to get a jump on these things, but with things that had been in flux with parkland and parkland dedication, we weren't sure if the footprint was changing, and that makes us start all over with the TIA. So it can become a huge waste of money if we do something and then throw it away and start over. And that decision wasn't made until a little more recently. So that's kind of why, we're a little behind on the schedule of this thing. But I could foresee that if the city wants to have the TIA, we could allow a footing foundation permit, even a building permit, because if this development turns out to require any improvements at area roadways, that can be done independent of the building. So, if a building needs to get started in April and we're not ready with the study until April, it becomes something of a foot race between getting the building done and getting the road work done, but it's not like we're going to get crushed by traffic on day one.
Okay, well then I would make a motion that we request the TIA and leave out the 4 sites?
What for? I think what's covering is this one is numbered 5, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's confusing me. Okay, leave out the 4 sites and allow construction to proceed before having any improvements if required, before the improvements are made. So they get started.
Susan, if I could interrupt you real quickly, I'm sorry. I did talk to Jeff at SRF today, and he also is recommending removing intersection 6 because he didn't realize that 6 is also in the city of Madison.
Where's
That's the one on down. That's the one furthest down.
they don't even.
When I talked to Jeff today, he didn't represent. Oh, wait,
Yeah,
okay.
remove 6 also.
When I talked to Jeff this afternoon, he didn't represent removing this. What happens is much the same way we study any other jurisdiction's intersections, including the Beltline ramps, which are under control of WISDOT. If we find something that recommends an improvement, we share it with that agency. So we don't do it ourselves, but we do make that information available to them. And so for that reason, I would say this is likely to be within a fair affected area of this development, and it should stay in, even though it's outside the city of Middleton.
Right, and that's the one where there's a 3-way stop.
There is now.
Yes,
Yeah.
now.
Well, Susan, my office is literally just to the right of number 6. I know that stop very well. And again, this apartment is only going to have 200 cars. It's like nothing. As opposed to an office building, which was fully approved, which had 400 cars. An office has the same impact as an apartment conceivably because people are arriving to the office at around the same hour every day and they're leaving at the same hour every day. So an apartment, if people do happen to go to work, which that has changed in the pandemic, now people are not leaving to go to work anymore, but if they were, you'd have cars leaving at about the same time to go to work, maybe earlier because they have to get to their work. So the hours maybe shifted a little bit, but still it's still half of what the office would have been. And if this was developed as an office building, we would not be here today asking about a TIA because it was well within the zoning permitted use of the PDD, an office building. So again, this was zoned for office, And I just amended it to an apartment, which is half the cars of a office building.
Okay.
So it's only 200 cars.
Yeah, I'm getting a little confused. On the PDD for the office, it didn't require a TIA?
That is correct, because the city only requires a TIA for a conditional use or a change in zoning. So what I did is because the pandemic hit, we requested an amendment to the zoning to allow an apartment to be constructed here. So that threw us into this requirement to have this TIA because of the city guidelines. But we could have built an office, which matter of fact, we had it approved, and it would have been 100,000 square feet with 400 cars in a parking ramp. And we would not have to do the TIA.
Okay.
Just in the
Mark,
last year, we've had it amended to allow for an apartment building.
could I have Mark Opitz clarify the TIA and PDDs? Because it's not quite making sense to me with the way PDDs work.
I've only listened to about half of the conversation because I wasn't planning, but I think I understand what, I heard what Mr. Newcomb was saying, and I would agree that the use that he's proposing, the requirement for a TIA is associated with the rezoning. And I would agree that the use that he is proposing is no more intense than what was previously approved. I think that's the gist of what he's
Right, but
advocating.
I guess what I'm concerned about is the PDD that was established for the office building. Was that, or was this only rezoned PDD for the apartment building?
This was the portion. Go ahead. You know it as well as me.
Okay, yeah, no, okay, so Susan, back in 1989, when Greenway Center was being developed, this was agriculture. This land was all agriculture. The Greenway Center asked for a rezoning of all this land into PDD, Planned Development District. This site was part of that, along with the site across the street, which was the Marriott. So since 1989, this has been zoned PDD, which the permitted use back then and even today would have allowed for office, convention center, hotel, retail, anything that is in the PDD, I could be building here.
But
And since I just amended it,
the only caveat I would say is that there used to be, this was parking, wasn't it, for a long time? For overflow? Yeah, I'm getting feedback, by the way. Is that on my end?
No,
Okay. Oh, that's better. Thank you. So wasn't this site surplus parking for Marriott at one point?
No, it was a cornfield.
it had been a parking lot for overflow for the convention center, I think, yeah.
That was the question I'm
Okay.
asking. So I'm not an expert on what the original PDD said in terms of the density of the number of surface parking stalls compared to the allowed permitted uses. And I would defer to Sean's judgment on the TIA requirements. But I would agree that if this site previously was allowed to have an office on it, was planned to have an office on it and not a surface parking lot, then I can see the merit in considering relaxing the TIA requirement. But again, that's really, I defer to Sean for his guidance.
Yeah.
To the
Okay,
Well,
I
and
would
it comes
like
into
to-
time of day as well, right? So we're looking at peak hours of the road peak hours. So they don't always align nicely, between office and residential when people are driving around.
Mhm.
And I don't have any particular rule of thumb that says, oh, who cares, big deal. Frankly, that might be the answer to this whole thing, is that it just doesn't matter very much. But when somebody comes back later and wants to complain about something and point fingers and scream about something, I will also not have a document to point at to say, no, we looked into that and it's not attributable to this site.
Sean, now that I understand when the PDD was established, I was getting confused. I thought when Brett first proposed the office building that he got it rezoned to PDD for that. And so if it had already been PDD from when Greenway Station was established, I would change my motion to not do the TIA.
I'd like to I don't But the thing that concerns me a little bit is if we don't, like, if it was a parking lot before, was the PDD, was that planned to have an office building there before? Because I think that's the intent why we have a TIA established if there's a change, because there's a change, and so we need to look at something again. So I don't know, I feel a little uncomfortable totally dismissing it.
Susan, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Oh, I was going. I would say, since it was a parking lot as overflow for the convention center, that would be, I just don't think it's necessary.
That's a different use, like an overflow parking lot for a convention center is a different use than an office building.
But that's not what the zoning was for originally. It was for an office building.
An
with
office
400
building.
Cars.
And the office
That's an
building was
approved.
approved.
It
with
it
400
doesn't make
cars.
any difference what it was used for. The original TIA on this was good enough to support an office building with 400 cars.
Well, that's what I'm not
I
completely clear on.
think the requirement for doing a TIA on a zoning change that reduces the density makes no sense.
Well, it's
I
hard
guess
to
I'm
say
just
if
a
it
little
reduces density, too. Again, this is all peak hour stuff, right? So if somebody could envision 600 offices or a 15-story apartment building, I mean, they're just different scales of things. So somebody could always say, well, then I'll just envision the most dense possible thing that could have been built there. And since I'm doing less than that, it doesn't apply to me. And that's fine if that's what the city wants, but I don't think that's what the city wants.
Yeah, I feel like that we're setting a precedence that's not great, because if there is a change, we're not really understanding what the traffic patterns are going to be with an apartment complex. They're two different things. And what I'm not clear about is what type of office building was exactly approved before, because I'm just hearing different things. I don't quite have a clear picture of what that was.
Well, I think before any of this area was platted or envisioned, really, there was this Southwest Quadrant study that Brett had referred to. That was a pretty gross approximation of future land development when there really wasn't much here. And they thought, okay, so it'll turn into something like whatever, medium density office or business park or what have you. But it's not retail, it's not residential, it's this. That doesn't mean something else couldn't be built there then. That's still zoned appropriately with a wildly different traffic pattern than the initial gross estimation. So it's always really hard to say when there's a really big area-wide study. It's not like a TIA. It's more like a, what should our road grid look like and how many lanes should we plan on? So if John Q. Hammonds needs to be 4 lanes, let's build it really wide.
Sean, if I can. Carrie, to answer your question about the office building, so this was back in 2020, just before the pandemic hit. We had a 4-story office building proposed for this site with a parking ramp on the west side. And after the pandemic hit in March, that tenant went away. So that project wasn't going forward anymore. And that's when we decided to just amend the zoning to an apartment. But let me speak to the study that was done in 1989. So the TIA for this site, whether it's an apartment or whatever, is really going to tell us if the streets and the intersections can handle the use on this particular site. Well, presumably the streets and the intersections have been designed to indeed handle the parking and the cars on this particular site, because this site, a permitted use is office, convention center, hotel, retail. Those are all permitted uses. So when the streets were all designed for this area and the intersections, they took into account the traffic that would be generated from this particular site and the sites around it already. So this particular site is now being reduced down to an apartment use. It's half the cars of office. Presumably, I mean, logically, it says to me, the streets have already been designed for worst case scenario. So I don't see why I need to spend $15,000 to $20,000 to basically convince us that it's already been done to support that kind of traffic.
I'm actually surprised, Sean, that the study's from 1989 and it still applies. Like, we don't update that.
Well, I don't think it was done to this scale at all. I'd be very surprised if it was. I think it was a very broad brush kind of thing. So obviously I haven't looked at it recently, but I would be extremely surprised if it mentioned anything about a particular site.
Well, it allowed for any of the sites zoned PDD to allow car parking for hotels, convention centers, expo centers, retail, and office. So in the intersections, I've been here long enough, I know what this used to be like. These roads and these intersections were built because of Greenway Station. Greenway Station was the catalyst for all this infrastructure. And that study back then helped the city design the infrastructure. So because my site was zoned PDD, it accounted for all that traffic, as did the convention center across the street and the retail just north of me. It assumed all this traffic. So the streets have already been designed for it. So what we're doing now is we're going to have a much lower use building there as far as traffic is concerned.
And at different times of day. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
that's right. That's right.
No.
Not really. I mean, an office, people are coming and going at 7 till 8. An apartment would be about the same because people are going to work. But even today, people don't go to work. They stay at home. So the use is going to be less than what it would have been otherwise.
But then there's people taking kids to school and things like that. I don't know. I don't think you can just say it's just people, I know there's commute times, but I think the apartment building traffic patterns would be different than an office building.
Is Susan's motion still on the table?
Without a second.
It is, it has not been seconded, and she was going to modify it, I think, to exclude intersection 6. Is that correct, Susan, or am I wrong?
My motion was to not do the traffic study.
Oh, okay, never mind.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so any further discussion at this point? Do we need clarification in the motion as to why we don't feel it's necessary, Sean?
Well, it would be helpful to me, and I think it would be helpful to the committee for future reference. Yeah.
Okay, I would clarify it in that the original TIA was, or the original TIA was done when this was rezoned to PDD for office type development, and the roads at that time were constructed to basically be able to take care of that kind of development. So they're big wide roads. They were constructed for for a higher use development, such as the office building. Since this is reducing the use by the number of cars basically in half, I think that previous study is still valid. Now, if this had been a situation where we were developing, or where the original PDD was rezoning an already developed area with the roads already constructed, that would be a different question. But these were roads that were constructed at that time for this development.
No, not for this development, because this is now an apartment building, which is different.
No, but I mean for this whole big area. The roads were developed for this being an office development area.
Yeah, well.
Or quite a few of them were.
I guess we'll just struggle in the future. I think any redevelopment then is going to come back to me and say, well, look, the roads were already designed and built.
That's what I was gonna ask Sean. Have we ever not done one of these studies when our guidelines say that we should?
Only if it's really small and right next to a really major facility.
That's my concern, is that we're setting up a precedent that every single developer is gonna now request this.
Maybe, we'll find out.
I do think, in my mind, that this qualifies as being built within major facilities, because that's all that is around this area are major facilities.
Mhm.
And the fact that this plot was originally laid out for large assumed traffic volumes within this development, that a TAA would be not needed in this area or the development proposed. Does that make more sense, Sean? Was that easier to come across than
Uh,
Susan's? I mean, Susan's was great, but
Yours is shorter and more engineer-like.
Yeah, I don't know that it gives me any particular guidance when someone asks again, but I'll ask you. And that's-
I would suggest that any rationale include that a TIA study or, has already been done, granted back in 1986 or whenever, whatever the date was. No PDD would have been required if this had been an office building, which would have had more traffic. It's now going to be an apartment complex with less traffic, but probably at pretty similar times a day. I know we can debate that a little bit, but probably pretty similar times a day between people coming and going from residences as people coming and going from a business park. And I think those three topics should be part of the rationale. But I share some of the same concerns that Carrie has. But if there's going to be a rationale, that I think those 3 points need to be in there.
So Sean, if this had been an office building as Brett proposed 2 years ago, we wouldn't have to do a TIA.
I think that wouldn't have required rezoning, and then it wouldn't have tripped that trigger.
Yeah, that's the thing that I keep thinking. If it didn't require it for that, because it didn't require rezoning to a less intense use, we shouldn't ask them to do a TIA.
So that should be a fourth point in the rationale.
The only thing I would say is that we don't know if it's less intense necessarily, right? And I think that's what the study would show us, is that like how would this impact traffic? We don't really know. None of us do.
We know that there's going to be 200 less cars.
yeah,
At
Do we?
various times of the day. Right, so I don't know what
Right,
it
we
means
don't
to
really.
intersection operations, and I agree, none of us do, and if we don't need to, that's fine.
Do you have those 4 points written down, Sean? The 3 that I made and the last one that that Susan made?
I think the last one was actually your second one, that
Oh,
no
I
study
didn't know
would
if
have
I
been
had clearly
required for
stated it
the
or not.
previous
okay.
proposal.
So
Okay.
that's an amendment to the motion. Is that how this is being taken, Sean?
I think I'll put that in discussion somehow. It's just too much for a
Okay.
motion, but.
Okay. So why don't we call a question and see where this goes?
Do we have a second on that? I didn't write it down.
We
Yeah.
do.
Carl,
Oh, okay. Oh, I did write it down. You should see my notes.
So calling the question, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
No,
Okay, so I got it 3-2 with Schaffner and Burke opposed. So the
That's
motion
what I
carries.
heard. Yeah, Robert and Carrie were opposed.
Mhm. All right, so the motion carries and we'll waive the TIA.
All right. So we can move on to official map. What is that, John?
Yeah, well, we've had an official map for a really long time, which helps us out in that we can lay out road corridors. And well, among other things, I'm sure you've read the statute that was included in the planning memo attached to the agenda. But the big one for purposes of Public Works Committee is that we can lay out future roadways, and then people can't plunk a building down in the middle of a future roadway, like Bellefontaine or wherever. So that's kind of handy. In fact, there's one up here from Airport Road that's laid out as if maybe someday Venture Avenue would become public. I think the flip side is the way it's laid out right now, this stays a private road and then we have public access off of the end of it. But there's no harm in mapping it as potential future public. Keeps that option open. Graber Road is envisioned that someday it may cross High Road and connect over to Whittlesey. That Misty Valley could connect down to it. And you'll recall we already have a water main through here for looping to Misty Valley. And then Bellefontaine Boulevard itself. Well, this shows a pretty straight alignment from Schneider Road. There's an alternate alignment that's been laid out. But planning redid this so that it would go through, I think it's a different acre over here. Edwin, I think, had owned this land. But that would come up and follow a different alignment because the other acre farm was bought by the county and we can't go through there anymore. Which then allows for, I think it's Rock Crest, to come up and connect to the future extension along this other alignment. So Bishop's Bay Parkway's been laid out for quite some time. So that's the majority of the future roads that are in this draft of the official map. But Plan Commission was looking for input from Public Works Committee, among others.
If I can add one thing, this is Mark, and if I can add one thing, you had a good summary of the streets, but you didn't mention the one by Rockcrest Road to Bishop's Bay. I don't recall if that was on a previous, I don't recall if that was on the previous official map. I think it was, but that is intended to provide another connection into the community of Bishop's Bay, east of Highway Q, following the lot lines. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this might be a good place because this is proposed as, well, I think Dave Gross lives here, but this is proposed as future multifamily, right?
Right. And I just felt, the lesson that I have observed over the years, the lesson that I have learned is to have three-way intersections is less efficient than a four-way intersection. And you look at Old Sauk Trails west of, in Madison along Old Sauk Road, and the disconnects between Excelsior Drive and what is that, Junction Road. It just makes sense to have four-way intersections. It's more efficient. And so I've proposed this as a way to facilitate circulation, including potential transit service in the future. So if there's loops that we can work with for not just transit, but others. So I would add that. And then also the path connections, we're allowed to map parkland and path, shared use paths. And so we are showing that with the dashed line with the circles, the dots, I guess. We've realigned that. If you go west a little bit, we've realigned that to connect with what the county is developing as a trailhead. And so that's something the PEDBAC Transit Committee will be commenting on at Thursday's meeting. So
all right. Great. So I don't know if the committee has any input or feedback. I see Robert has his hand up.
I'm called upon, sure. I think the map looks great personally. I do, my only question is mapping a route doesn't tell us if something, for instance, Bellefontaine Boulevard is a 70-mile-per-hour highway or a 25-mile-per-hour residential. And is there anything in this map that goes a different way or would be done differently if you know that there's a slower portion of something or a faster portion of something than you were thinking? And I guess I'm directing that question a little bit to Mark, if he can speak to it, because I know at one point in the past, Bellefontaine was considered to be a feeder or a whatever, feeder? No.
Well,
regional.
I think it was designated as a future collector with design standards to minor arterial.
Okay, so minor arterial, but now the proposal that we're all mostly looking at is that it will be fairly slow right before it gets to Parmenter. Does that change anything that's on this map?
This is just a future corridor map, so it doesn't mean that this is designed or even that the future proposal will follow this corridor with a design, right? So if the developer, I'm just gonna, say on this future Bellefontaine, right, comes through and says, I think it just would work better if this curve were moved up a little or down a little or broadened or narrowed, we can consider that. It doesn't mean that we have to follow that alignment.
And I get that. I'm not so much worried about the path shown.
Yeah.
I'm worried about the speed that's not shown. If the thought that was that we're going to put this road between Parmenter Street and whatever is to the east, is it County Road O, P, K? I don't know, way over to the right, off the screen.
Over to Q.
At some point it joins in with
Q. Well, yeah, it'll cross Q up at
Q.
Is that?
Sorry, I got my letters way off.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And then people
So
can get
if
over
the
to
thought,
M.
if the thought is that road can move traffic, that's great. But if the thought is it moves traffic at 25 miles per hour along that entire length, because at one point we're going to prevent it from going, it won't really slow it down over the whole path, but we're talking about bringing it down to a pretty slower speed in a residential area in, Belmead right there, or Bellefontaine. Sorry, I keep saying Belmead because I have a cousin who lives on a road called Belmead. Bellefontaine. Again, knowing a path is great, but if you're thinking something's going to be a highway and we turn it into a residential street, does that change what's envisioned here? Would you route roads differently, like completely away from a residential area, if your intent is to move highway speed traffic through on a road?
Well, it's a good question.
Robert,
And a lot of times we try to focus on the bigger picture anyway and don't worry so much about every little street in terms of official mapping. But, so obviously we want this to be some sort of connection. But you're right. We're not here designing the road.
It's definitely a connection. And I may be asking a question that doesn't need to be asked here, but I'm asking the question just because if it does need to be asked here, I want us thinking about that. Right now, the plan, everything's moving forward that the traffic will be probably in the ballpark of 25 miles per hour, I think, and narrower roads once it gets into the Bell, is it Bell Farms? Sorry,
Mhm.
I forget the
Yeah,
name of the
mhm, mhm.
subdivision
Over in here.
exactly. And I think that's great. I think that's what we want for that subdivision. And I want to make sure that everybody, including people who deal with the MPO very often, are, fully understanding that, and, that this connection as shown on this future connection is shown on this map. Don't see that as a concern or a problem.
Robert, can I make a comment?
You may.
I think, and I was real familiar with the previous map, which the whole Bellefontaine issue has gotten changed because the county bought the acre farmland, which it was supposed to go through. I'm not.
It changes.
Let me finish.
Okay, I will.
So, but just in terms of the future growth of the city, it's this area north of here of the city limits, and that's most likely going to be residential. We also, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a county road that's supposed to connect through further to the north as we grow. That would be a better main connector road. So I don't have a problem with this as it is. Because I can also see if there's people coming in from the north, they're going to go down Q, they're going to go down High Road. They'll probably take Pheasant Branch until they learn that Middleton Hills retail area is too congested. But just in terms of, I think we're worrying a little too much about the speed of the road and the size of it, considering that this is going to go through residential area, most likely.
I'm not concerned with it either. I'm just asking questions.
Okay.
So
And I will
Sean,
say, people in Misty Valley really like the idea of the 2-lane road.
Yeah, but if we funnel high-speed traffic on the further east on the map and say this is this road all floods into the subdivision, those people are not going to be happy either, because we will have been directing more traffic into their subdivision. So I just want to make sure that we don't.
Misty Valley will not, if it's a 2-lane road, people will go down High Road.
Sure.
I got my hand.
Don, you're your own. You can do it.
Yeah, I know. So I'll take my own hand down, but I think, your concern, Robert, I guess it's well taken, but if you're going to go down that road, then you should show every other major collector as well on the city map. And we don't.
Sure.
They're just roads. It's just a road. It's like a sidewalk. I mean,
Okay.
It doesn't mean anything other than, yeah, we might put a road here some way. And I know that everything we put on here is flexible, because if I recall, I don't think the Bellefontaine Road looked anything like this as it went through that proposed new subdivision. It was sort of, well, in fact, they made it snake-like just to count traffic. So, obviously it's going to get changed as roads are developed and things actually go in place, but it does give us a warning that somebody comes in and says, hey, we want to put this here. Wait, we've got a road that might go through that area, and let's stop and think about it first. I think that's all that Sean's trying to do with this map, and as well as planning.
Okay.
Mostly planning, I would say, have taken the
Okay,
lead on
not
this.
Sean,
I think,
just planning. We'll
yeah.
blame Mark Opitz then.
Well, I think Daphne did quite a lot of it, and Mark has been really helpful, especially with Bellefontaine realignment, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. So what
My
do you need
questions-
tonight, Sean, for this?
Yeah, my questions have been answered. I appreciate everything that's been said in the background. This is my first time in the role of Public Works approving one of these maps, as far as I know. So I just want to make sure that I understand what I'm voting on. I'll let other people make comments, but I would actually make a motion to approve this map.
Well, and this
As,
is just,
as it's shown, I think it's a good map.
yeah, this is really just for input back to the plan commission, and eventually they'll need a public hearing before the common council can approve it. So we can't approve this.
Oh, then I see there's a hand raised, so since my motion was not a good motion anyway yet, why don't we call on other people? Don, do you want to call on other people?
Sure. I
Yeah,
gotta
Kathleen.
get my
has her hand
fingers
up.
down here. Yes, Kathleen.
Hello, my name's Kathleen Slattery Moscow, and I'm actually the developer of Bell Farm. And I don't want to jump into something at this point that maybe it's just not even appropriate for me to comment on, because it does sound like you guys are looking at this from just a super high level. But I also just want to make sure that this isn't a missed opportunity, like that consideration of whether Bellefontaine is going to be 4 lanes from Parmenter up to Misty Valley is, we're at a standstill until we get an answer on that. And so maybe this isn't the meeting, and maybe this isn't the, you know, the right moment, but it seems like in the past, sometimes meetings get pointed to as, well, that got approved as X, Y, and Z. You know, before this was a collector road. You know, I just want to make sure that we are not, I want to make sure that that's being considered here, but maybe I'm also recognizing that maybe this is not the right meeting to talk about that. So that's all I've got to say.
Not to speak for Sean, but I think we're not even looking at it helicopter level. We're still up at the, 747 level.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is mostly reserving a corridor. And schematically, the corridors have a certain width, but it's negotiable, and a certain alignment, but it can be changed with, both parties being in agreement. It's effectively saying, this is our big picture plan. Some road is going to go through here, but we already know that.
Yeah. Also, Mark, didn't we approve something on Bellefontaine that it would be, and I think it was this committee, a 2-lane road if it passed the MPO?
Yeah, that was,
were-
go ahead, Sean, you
We
actually
were
wrote
waiting
the,
for the MPO to do some modeling to get back to us to inform the TIA as to whether that would work or not. And the MPO did provide us an email with that analysis, and I asked for it in memo form so that I could share it with the committee as we continue our discussions about this. Just cutting ahead, their analysis shows from modeling, again, traffic demand modeling, that a 2-lane facility probably would work in the long term. So we still have to figure out a little bit, well, what does that mean? But it looks like it doesn't have to be a 4-lane divided boulevard kind of road in the long term. So that's one big thing. That's not what this map does.
Good.
Okay, that's helpful information. Thank you.
So again, Sean, what do we need to do? Anything with this other than the comments that you've gotten so far?
Yeah, I think if the committee has any feedback or input for the plan commission to modify this map in some ways, either you like something, you don't like something, something's missing and should be drawn in, probably particularly with future roads. That's, I think, the step we're at here.
I think the key is going to be your public hearings with the developers that are developing the areas in these various areas that are going to come in and say, well, we're going to want to do this and this and this, and this might be better. And I think that's going to be more informative than us looking at this from a big picture standpoint. That's my opinion anyway. I mean, this is nice, it sort of gives us a layout, but you're going to get a lot more feedback when this goes to public hearing. Obviously.
Sure, and each incremental piece, it's not like we charge forward and build 2 miles of road. It gets built piece by piece, and that's kind of how we discuss these things. So,
I'm sorry, this is Kathleen again, and I guess my only concern is that I don't know what the next steps are for us. We can't even begin platting until we have this information, and it keeps getting kicked down the road. So I am a little at a loss as to what are the next steps so that we can know whether we have to allow the 4 lanes or the 2 lanes. We've been at this a long time, and this question's been on the table for a long time, and now we will be at a standstill. So I guess I'm, again, maybe I'll send you an email separately, Sean, but I just don't know where to go anymore.
Yeah, and really what I was hoping for is that memo from MPO that clarified, because the email was open to a lot of interpretation, and then they clarified some stuff over the phone. So I don't have anything pulled together that I could give to a committee and say, hey, here's where we're at. I was hoping to have had that. They did say mid-December, so it's not the 13th, clearly. Late December, we won't be having a meeting because our meeting night falls on a recognized or an observed, holiday. But prior to the next meeting then in January 10th, I guess that would be, I think we should have that put together and an idea. I want to talk to Bruce anyway, but I expect it'll be a 2-lane road. What I don't know is the alignment and or, what we want to do on that road. So some of the cross-section stuff I think we should talk about. And then after that, I think we need to get it into the TIA for study of what these intersection movements and roadways are going to work as to make sure that we're on a good track for the thing to actually function right.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay. So no action required then, Sean, at this point?
If there's no feedback or input, then no, I'll just pass along to the planning staff that we didn't have any changes to recommend.
Or you could maybe state there's no objection.
Or no objection, if
Yeah.
That would be easier.
So I
I'll
could
state
ask
it.
the question, are there any objections?
No objections.
No,
None here.
Okay.
None here.
So hearing none, we could actually move off this agenda point if we so desire and go to adjournment and all have a happy holiday.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second the motion, and I also hope we have a happy holiday.
Yes.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Okay. I guess we could call a vote, but it's almost like unanimous. So all in favor of adjourning.
Aye.
Bye.
And have a happy holiday. Yes, both of them.
Thank you.
All right,
Happy
see you all-
holidays.
Well, I'll see others between now and then, but until then, all next year.
All right.
Thanks.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.